Coming up this weekend at featherweight, it's a card headlined by lightweight champ taking on featherweight champ. And an interim featherweight belt, we have a couple of great up-and-comers squaring off. It's Kuya, Joshua Culibao, taking on the gun, Melsik Baghdasaryan, in a fight that kind of hits like the song Element by Kendrick, but I can't sing that on this channel because there's a lot of words that I just can't say with my complexion.
Good tune, though.
Matt, we have this big-time matchup, and I'm really excited about this one because for Melsik Baghdasaryan, we were promised such a high-level striker coming into the UFC, and for the most part, he definitely has delivered. 7-1 as a pro, lost his pro debut back in 2014 by submission, and then he just continued to hone his craft with his kickboxing, and he was a former WLF Wars kickboxing champ. He challenged for a K1 welterweight title. He was unsuccessful there, but then he really kind of stepped just 2 feet in that pool and decided to become a mixed martial artist. And training out of Glendale Fighting, Edmund Tarverdian, but also Muay Thai America Gym in California, Melsik Baghdasaryan's been a really impressive prospect in the fact that he's going to defend your takedowns, try and beat you up on the feet. And in his 2 UFC fights, he fought Bruno Souza's last time out a little over a year ago. He fought Colin Anglin in the debut and finished him. And he beat Dennis Bazookia over on Dana White's Contender Series. The most interesting thing out of Baghdasaryan is me not finishing the word series and just calling it Serie. But if you do look at it for Melsik, he's kind of like Nick Maximov in one respect. Totally polar opposite fighters, different weight classes. But both guys won on Contender Series in dominant fashion. And then Dana White said, no, I want to see you back on the show. They waited, and then the UFC signed them both. So for Baghdasaryan, beats Bazookia, but it wasn't really enough. And then he ends up fighting Anglin. Now, he's been matched up in a couple of fights in 2022, but he was forced out of both of those. Now, one of them was against TJ Laramie, which is the second time they tried to make that fight. And one was against Joanderson Brito.
And what a fight that would have been.
I'll throw the picture up there, though. Melsik broke his right hand. So you hate to see it, but hopefully he's fully recovered. And for Joshua Culibao in the UFC, I had no damn clue what he was going to be in the UFC. Debuted against Jalen Turner up a weight class on short notice, and he lost. And we didn't get to see much out of him. But then if you go through the fights, he had a really competitive fight against Charles Jourdain, and his last 2 fights, he ends up going out there against Shailan Nordembeka, kind of defends or at least deals with the takedowns, beats him up on the feet, and his last time out against Sungwoo Choi, split decision win. He had him on skates in the first and second round. So really good fight out of Culibao. One of those fight of the night style ones out of him. So Culibao now taking on Baghdasaryan. I don't know if he's going to have some of those striking advantages that we've seen in some of these fights.
Exactly.
But hey, I mean, both guys should meet in the center of the octagon, and Culibao's not this kind of world championship level wrestler, so I don't really expect that to be a part of his game plan against Baghdasaryan.
He does have good MMA wrestling, though, I will say. Like, Culibao, it has surprised me on a couple occasions. Even in the Jourdain fight where he mixed it in a little bit, that was nice to see.
Yeah, he hasn't been credited with a takedown in the UFC, but the defensive chops are there and the scrambles are there, too.
And that's what I mean. Like, for Culibao, I do think he does have the advantage in the grappling in this matchup, although I don't think that's an area of either guy's game. We will see. What I do think we'll see, though, is trips from Baghdasaryan if this does end up in the clinch. He does like to use those just to offset the balance of his opponent to then open up some of his own strikes, and that's just a really unique tactic that not a lot of fighters do use. Zabit was someone who would use that way back in the day. Again, one of the great what-ifs the MMA world has ever had, but Culibao's the much more damaging fighter with his hands when he is able to land those boxing combinations, because he is a pretty heavy-handed fighter when he is able to get there. But the problem is, Culibao, I don't like how he closes distance in a lot of these situations. Again, Marvin Vittori's the guy whose name gets brought up probably once every 2 or 3 weeks. It's just a guy who really learned how to be effective with his style of striking, with his style of grappling, and how to flush those two together and really fuse them. With Culibao, he does have the striking, he just doesn't really have the footwork to get him into his best position, and I think the footwork's going to be the most important part of this fight, because Baghdasaryan's not the kickboxer of a guy like Alex Pereira, who's going to march you down primarily with his hands, and then use his kicks as kind of the accoutrement, if you will, to some of his combinations. Baghdasaryan's going to stay on the back foot a little bit more and use his movement a bit to then set up some of his counter shots. So we'll be interested to see what Baghdasaryan does if he does get touched up early in the fight. Will he then allow himself to still stay on the back foot, or will he be the one really trying to push the fight and land some of those knees up the middle? Because if he can land the knees up the middle, and if Culibao can land some of those hooks around the sides, that's going to make for a very entertaining fight.
And you saw those hooks out of Culibao, but the thing with his footwork, I think it's coming along. He's a former Hex fighting champion at featherweight going back to 2017, but out of Culibao, he does have some of those like load ups like a Darren Till, and he will throw, again, really good hooks. The thing that I like out of Culibao, he will switch stances quite a bit, but it's not to a detriment. It's not like forced movement. It really does open up the plethora of his boxing, and he'll go to the head, he'll go to the body, he'll mix things in. You saw that against Choi. You saw that in his win beforehand. You saw that against Charles Jourdain, a fight that most people actually thought Culibao would win that one, even though it went to a split draw. For Melsik, I mean, you go down through it, like he's fought a level of competition outside of the UFC, wasn't necessarily the best. He was 9-2 in kickboxing, 3-0 in boxing, but it really is tough to say. I mean, the wins that he had kind of when he went back into MMA, 14-second knockout, 32-second knockout, 9-second knockout, 7-second knockout, all in the first round. Combined opponent record of those 4 guys was 7-8. So not a good level of competition. In the UFC, Anglin kind of fizzled out and struggled on the regional scene afterwards. And his last time out against Bruno Souza, the former LFA featherweight champ, it's kind of a stinker of a fight.
Like, if you get 3 straight fights, if you win 3 straight fights via, like, 10-second knockout, do you just think you're the greatest fighter ever after that 3rd one? Like, you're just sitting in the locker room like, oh my goodness.
I have the Midas touch.
Yeah, like, what am I capable of? I just think this fight could go 2 very distinct ways. If Culibao can be the bully and kind of make it an uglier fight, I do think he kind of have success. I do worry about him with his stance switching, though, because it will open up some of the straight shots off angles from Baghdasaryan. Now, he's going to have to utilize that technique and use it very well to have that success, but I do think it's an area of his game that he can show in this matchup. But, again, we don't have this on the Fight of the Night screen because we think it's going to be a one-sided beatdown one way or the other. This should be a really fun striking matchup between these 2 guys.
A performance of the night bonus for the debut at a Melsik Baghdasaryan, and if you look at it for Culibao, in his last fight, he was a plus 190 underdog against Seungwoo Choi. That didn't win fight of the night. That was a great one at UFC 275, a card that had the fight of the year in the main event between Teixeira and Prochazka. Matt, if we look at the odds, they're pretty well at par between these 2 guys. We have a look at the Topology vote. Surprise to us there, to you. You got the man out of Southeastern Australia in Joshua Culibao. I think the fans will rally around him. I'm going to say over under 62.5% Culibao. I think it's going to be close enough.
I think they'll be over.
Think they're going to be over? Look at that.
No way.
725 total votes. 58% Baghdasaryan, 74% by decision. For the 42% that have Culibao, 81% by decision. I'm a Seungwoo Choi fan. You dropped him 3 times. You got my attention. Now, he had my attention before. Now, Mike Trizano did that. Had my attention. UFC cut him. So, listen, just weird decisions. We like 10-10 fighters, 12-12 fighters. Keep that fat trimmed off. But when I look at a matchup like this, Culibao's striking continues to evolve, and he's really impressed me in the UFC. It's just a counter-striking of Baghdasaryan's kind of that question mark that I have in this.
And that's what I keep on going back to, and that's why I do find myself picking Melsik in the matchup. I think he's going to have to eat some big shots, too, in this fight. Don't get me wrong. He's going to have to face that adversity. I just think he's going to be a half step ahead when it does come to some of the movement and some of the counter-striking on the outside. Now, again, if you are going to have that counter-striking mindset, you're going to have to avoid big shots. You're going to have to land your own big shots as a response. But I do think Melsik ever so slightly has that advantage on the feet, and I do believe that's primarily where this fight's going to be contested, and for that reason I've got Melsik.
Yeah, and I think Baghdasaryan off the back foot, moving side to side laterally, I think he has an advantage in this fight. He's a more precise striker to these 2 guys, but Culibao, if I've seen anything, again, he's continued to impress me. It sucks that I'm not picking him to win this fight, but I think this is going to be an absolutely amazing one. At featherweight, both of us going with Baghdasaryan. He's an American citizen now, so Baghdasaryan to get the win. A big-time matchup in this division. And again, co-main event for the interim championship. Main event, your featherweight champ taking on your lightweight champ. It's a great card with UFC 284. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks. We always say,
let's get into it.